Okay, I know that I did the episode where I said I wasn't going to discuss love, sex, or relationships. And just for the record, this isn't an overcorrection or anything, but this episode is going to be about love, sex, and relationships and nothing else. Like, I know it seems like it was planned, and yet it actually wasn't. Like most of these things just kind of fell on my lap like this. And to be completely honest, I did not intend for this episode to have everything, most of the sex part, because that one's a little bit more than it usually is in terms of discussion. But, it is what it is. And, what better way to start things off than talking about something that relates to attraction? It's just that it's not the kind that some of you would probably be expecting. I'd actually argue that no one would have known what it is that I'm about to say. So, apparently, there is a very attractive gorilla in Japan that has increased female attendance in that particular zoo simply because of how it looks. Now, I don't know if it's just a me thing, but last I checked, Asian people usually tend to be quite racist. So I'm a little bit puzzled that they were attracted to something that was big and black. But, maybe Pornhub opened up a branch there. Although there was one song that kept ringing in my head when I saw this story, which I felt probably should be integrated into this story so that it can sound a little bit better. And it's a fairly old song, so you'll tell me if it sounds almost like it. My black ape brings all the girls to the zoo and they're like, arigato.
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Honestly, the number of gorilla jokes that I can make in regards to this entire thing, like you can't even start with once you go black, you never go back. Like at the end of the day, these guys kind of have to go back to their houses. So maybe that's why they keep coming back. But like the number of things that you can say about this, if the zoo fences came down, then, he'd have to fight off all these women via guerrilla warfare. Like, imagine if this gorilla identified itself as a woman. Would they still be attracted to it? Like, there's so many things that you can say about this, but it still doesn't change the fact that it's very, very wild that an entire group of people decided to go and stare at a black gorilla because it is supposedly attractive. Now, for the record, I don't know what makes a gorilla attractive, although I do find it particularly odd that the women are attracted to this gorilla, yet it's not like the gorilla resembles any Japanese man. Because last I checked, I've never seen a Japanese man who looks like a gorilla. All of the ones I see usually look like Japanese men, or at least they look like men, but from Asia. But with that said, there's a video that came with this story, so I'm just going to let it play so that I can get into it a little bit more. So without further ado...
This is Shabani, and he's considered so attractive that he literally caused an increase in female visitors at a zoo in Japan. So in 2015, Shabani became a global sensation for his handsome looks, and crowds of people would constantly surround his exhibit, and women would shout things like, "Look at me, Shabani." In fact, because things were getting out of control, the zoo had to put up a sign telling people to calm down and stop with the shouting. And believe it or not, people are saying that Shabani is the gorilla version of George Clooney. And because of his popularity, he basically became a celebrity, and pictures of him were put on boxes of sweets during Valentine's Day. And until today, they sell a Shabani arm pillow.
Hold up. Wait, you're telling me that there's a gorilla that is a celebrity because... What the fuck? Like, this makes no sense at all. Alright. Like, I don't think the Japanese men are that unattractive. It's not like I've tested. Not really my type. But still... They actually got to a point where like he got his own merch line. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just a me thing, but maybe we need to start looking at what Japanese women find attractive, because clearly if this is the case, I know a couple of guys that would pass for gorillas if you gave them a bit of extra fur. So put them on a mink, send them to Japan, these guys will be millionaires in days. Although then again, I might be wrong about this entire thing, and maybe they're interested in the animal, not the look of the animal. So I'm just going to leave it at that and start the podcast, because at least that's something I understand in a much better way with a little bit more pizzazz, maybe with a lot less animosity, by saying, welcome to the Breaktime Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who clearly does not have the gorilla in him, because he still asks women to say his name. Not the other way around, like Shabani. He's a man who is looking forward to the Japanese musical From Primates with Love. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. This episode has started in probably one of the most interesting ways possible. Because if you were to say that I am going to give you some ape version of a person that is tall, dark, and possibly considered handsome, people would think that I'm talking about myself. But the fact that there's a gorilla in Japan that just knows how to do it better than the rest of us is probably a testament that the old ways work best, and whatever the hell Charles Darwin said maybe might be true. Maybe we came from these apes, but we're the weaker kind. So, either way, it shouldn't be all that bad in terms of us trying to find a way to score some Japanese pussy. But all in all, monkey business aside, this is one of the Friday episodes, and as usual, I usually like to take a deep dive into Twitter, or is it X, and find a couple of tweets and break them down a little bit. And it is one of the episodes where you can exclusively send in the different tweets that you see, whether it's on Twitter or is it X or on Facebook or on IG, and I can take it and handle it accordingly, and I'll explain how in just a second, because it's a pretty simple thing to do. Almost sounds like a drill, and it goes like this. You see that tweet, you like that tweet, you want us to discuss that tweet, you send that tweet. You send it to the DMs of @BagakaTheD on Twitter, and I will take it from there and I will handle it accordingly. On Facebook or on IG, if it happens to be a screenshot, a screen grab, if it ended up on a reel, or if it was part of an image, then the place to send it to on Facebook, it is at The Break Time Podcast, and on IG, it is at The Breaktime_podcast. The DMs are always open, and I will take it from there and I will handle it accordingly. Now, I've got a couple of tweets that I need to break down, all of which involve some version of love or sex. But before I can get into that, I first want to whet your appetites by proving through a study that these hoes ain't loyal. Now, there was a study that was published on the Daily Mail sometime towards the end of last year, which showed that over 50% of women have a backup partner in mind, which is honestly quite boggling because we actually thought that there were good women out here. But anyways, let me just read, the small caption that came with this entire story. So it says, and I quote, "A study published on the Daily Mail that surveyed 1,000 women revealed that 50% admitted to having a fallback partner, such as a gym buddy or ex-boyfriend. Surprisingly, 1 in 10 women disclosed that their plan B had already professed love, and 40% formed these connections while committed, claiming feelings for the backup partner were as strong as for their current partner." End quote. Now, to be quite honest, you kind of look at shit like this and you're like, these hoes ain't loyal. And if you're a guy and you saw this study, then you probably concluded that you'll probably say no to dating and or marriage and, stay single or some shit like that. And I probably wouldn't blame you for that. It's just, I wouldn't entirely trust everything that's been said. Now, of course, a couple of people went into the comment section and they were busy talking about how the sample size of 1,000 people is quite small in order to actually do a sound study. Like, you'd probably expect a much larger number, like, maybe 10,000. And there were some other people that were saying that, men have not only a backup partner, but they're probably already involved with that backup partner, which, I honestly feel is mostly bullshit because, you can't claim that just because a couple of guys cheat, that all guys cheat. Now, with everything said and the fact that a bunch of people had different thoughts on this, to be quite honest, as a guy that has been in the dating market, as a guy who's dated, as a guy who's, been with women who were dating a guy at the time and has been, the fallback partner in one case or another, as well as the guy that the woman cheated on her man with, at least in 1 or 2 cases, I can probably say that in as much as this study doesn't particularly represent all women or even the largest majority, there's a good chunk of women that actually do this. Now, I'm saying this based off of my experience and based off of a lot of the stories that I usually get. And what I can say is a lot of times, even when some women don't necessarily know it, they may actually start to lean towards another guy as some sort of backup partner or as some sort of emotional cushion or sponge to now start to talk about, their feelings, their thoughts, and so on and so forth. Now, granted, it's not always their fault, because a lot of times you'll find that whenever you're getting towards the rocks of the relationship, whenever the relationship is really at its lowest, there's usually at least one partner, if not both of them, that will start having some person give them a lot more attention, start to show them that, they'd probably be a great after partner, if they drop this person, or even, in the meantime and all. So there are a lot of women that will get this kind of treatment, not necessarily because they were looking for it, but because there was someone who was readily available and might have even been actively trying to get into the sport where the current main dude is, or just in a sport where he can lay pipe. And they'll end up with such a backup partner as a result. Now, what does this mean for guys? The truth of it is, when it comes to attraction and women, there's only so much that you can control. Like, the one thing that I usually say to every guy that I personally believe myself is, at the end of the day, always treat your woman well and listen to her, and for the most part, try to keep her happy. Like, that's honestly the most that you can do as a guy. Try to keep her happy. Like, when it comes down to it, if a baby is going to cheat on you, there's a pretty good chance that she'll do it and you won't know. And even though you might get close to it, she might gaslight you into thinking that you're mad and you're suspecting her wrongly or some shit. So for the most part, instead of trying to find out whether she's cheating on you or not, just try to treat her as well as you possibly can. And if you discover or if you suspect that she's cheating on you and you find out that she is, at the end of the day, you can leave with a clean heart and a clean conscience, knowing full well that you did what you could to keep her happy, but it clearly just wasn't enough, and the problem was on her, not on you. Like, to be very honest, that's honestly the most that you can do as a guy. Because the moment you start bringing in the whole, if she has a fallback partner, maybe I need to just figure out who they are and get them out of the way. Or, if I see her around any dudes and it's over between me and her, like, at the end of the day, most of what you're doing is just trying to prevent the inevitable if you're not treating her well. And for the most part, most of what you're trying to do is so much work, which is mostly unnecessary if you treat her well. And if she cheats on you at that point, then it's her who's played herself. Like, at the end of the day, just make life easier for yourself. Although then again, I might be wrong about all of this shit, and maybe the study was correct to a degree. Either way, I am going to leave it at that and move it on to our very first tweet of this episode. So, on to our very first tweet of this episode. Now, the tweet is a particularly simple one, and it was sent by a woman who said, and I quote, "I hate how people have monetized love." End quote. Okay, I don't want to trivialize whatever the hell's been said, but it's something that's been happening for decades, to be quite honest. Like, if you kind of think about it, I think it's just that it's a lot more, in your face now than it's been before. But I feel like love's always been monetized for the past, you could probably even say over 50 years. Because when you kind of think about it, there's a lot of things that are considered tradition or necessary in a lot of people's lives today in relation to relationships and dating, which I find to be particularly pointless. Stuff like the girlfriend allowance. Like, people talk about how, you should give your girlfriend a girlfriend allowance. Or women will be like, I want my man to give me a girlfriend allowance and shit. Yet, for the most part, it's mostly unnecessary. Especially when you find out that this is someone who's working and the man is also working. So, it makes zero sense at all. But aside from that one, which is a little bit more niche, there's a lot of other things that, do show that love has been monetized. Stuff like going on a date and, the man has to pay for everything. That's something that's been monetized by love, because you think about it, considering that both sides are working, why not split the bill? Stuff like that. And, there's arguments for and against the entire thing, but it is a situation where you can argue that it is a situation where you can argue that love has been monetized, because there are women who, I kid you the hell not, have not just gone on one date but multiple dates just so that they can eat. I kid you the hell not. There's even a statistic that shows that a majority of women go on dates for the food and not even for the guy. And there's some people that even made a thing out of the entire thing. Like, there's a woman who, according to a story back in the beginning of 2023, went on 6 dates a week to save on food. And she herself said that she didn't buy groceries for 2 years. 2 fucking years. You're just going out on dates 6 days a week just so you can save up on food. And if you think that I'm just being a stingy nigga with this entire thing, let me give another example. Valentine's Day. That shit is so much more of a marketing gimmick than it is an actual holiday, especially considering that people who sell flowers probably will even triple or quadruple the prices of flowers just because guys are trying to impress their women. And the people that are selling chocolates usually sell out, they'll have certain offers, but they'll just bundle a shit ton of chocolate, which you probably won't even need and is probably even unhealthy for you simply because it's Valentine's Day and it's celebrated a certain way. You can also throw in hotels into that, restaurants into that. Like, it's more of a marketing thing than it is a celebration of love. And considering that this was something that I actually learned just today when I'm recording this, the engagement ring is probably the biggest marketing trick that people have been played since the late 30s or beginning 40s. I kid you the hell not. The engagement ring exists, and even the calculation of how much the engagement ring is supposed to be worth exists because of a marketing drive by a company that sells diamonds. Like, the thought about the monetization of love being a recent thing, nah. This is something that's been happening for a very long time. The only difference is today it's more in your face and more guys have seen it, considered the fact that the barriers of entry are a little too high and are avoiding relationships altogether in favor of situationships or simply just being single. But then again, I might be wrong on this entire thing, so I am going to leave it at that and move it on to our very next tweet. So, on to our very next tweet of this episode. So, it's a tweet that was posted up by another lady who said, and I quote, "Men doubling down on not liking lingerie is so aggy. LOL. That's how you know men just view sex like animals for the most part. That's why they see no value in foreplay. It's never about the seduction, just the act. I don't know, it just gives ache after a while because why is it so hard to appreciate sexy lingerie?" End quote. Okay, so the question that I'd probably ask at this point is, how else are we supposed to look at sex? You know, beyond the initial part of sex that exists for every single animal that reproduces through intercourse. Like, let's look at it from its baseline. Sex at its very core is a primal act that a good chunk of animals actually take a part in. And we are also animals. So do you think I am going to start being horny and I crave an emotional connection while I'm horny? Like, come on, bruh. Like, what the fuck do you think I'm supposed to be thinking about? You know, like, you can make that whole argument about, oh, you know, that's why they don't care about foreplay, blah, blah, blah. And for the most part, you could be right about that. It's just, for the most part, you really can't make too much of an argument about us looking at sex at its most basic. Like, you can ask us to look at it as more than that, which, you know, it's kind of like a whiskey connoisseur busy getting pissed off because people just want to get drunk with whiskey. But, you know, it's definitely something that you can ask us to do, or at least your particular partner. Now, on the lingerie part, I'm going to be particularly honest and only speak for me when I say I prefer a woman when she is dressed in her birthday suit when it comes to bedroom matters. I look at lingerie as obstruction between me and the act that the both of us want to do at the end of it all. Now, you might look at it as this special expression of how great your body looks, blah, blah, blah. But to be very honest, I am not into lingerie because I feel like it's an obstruction from me feeling all of your body. And for the most part, with the way this babe seems to be complaining about guys and not liking lingerie, it's kind of like she wants us to like something that we ourselves don't like simply because she likes it. It's kind of like if a guy that works out super hard has like 10% body fat and like a shit ton of muscle that's very well defined, all of a sudden comes out and is like, why is it that women don't appreciate muscular guys that put all their work in the gym? Like, don't you guys think that we look good after we put in days, months, years in the gym, working out, just so we can look great for you? Like, at the end of the day, like, that shit is appealing to you and to you alone. For me, I prefer you in your birthday suit. I prefer it when I don't have any obstruction when I'm trying to bang. And if you would stick to having your desires stay with you and leave my desires stay with me, would probably be a hell of a lot happier in this entire thing. But then again, maybe I'm asking for too much, so I'm just gonna leave it at that and move it on to our very final tweet of this episode. Now, this one was also sent over by a woman, and she said, and I quote, "Guys, how comes after you've smashed a babe, y'all start acting weird? What happens to that obsession you had minutes, days ago? That regular checking up on her suddenly stops, then start acting busy. So now the woman is the one who has to do the chasing. And first of all, the people that even act like this are usually the ones that give you premium dick." End quote. Okay, now I'm not the biggest fan of Andrew Tate, and unfortunately for some of you, I'm going to have to quote him on this because he gave a statement once before which kind of encapsulated the exact reason why guys do a lot of this shit in probably the most concise way I can think of. And he said that a woman usually has value up until she has sex with a man. After she has sex, that value is gone. Now, I'm not saying that the guy is 100% right in what he said, but he's not 100% wrong. Because I kid you the fuck not. Like, you as a guy will see value in the babe, you will go, you will chase, you will lust after this woman, and the moment you go and you bang, after you bang the babe, if you get up and leave immediately, you might leave her feeling like a hoe. If you stick around, you might make her feel wanted, and eventually you could turn it into a relationship. It could go a number of different ways, but a lot of that shit usually falls back on the guy. Because now at that point, everything that you choose to do after that sort of becomes more of a courtesy than it is a must or something that makes you feel like it's a requirement. Like, take for example, if a shorty on campus goes and lets a guy on campus bang her, and then she decides to send him all of her assignments, asking her to do them for her, at some point this guy will just decide to stop, or he can choose to stop or not to do them, and it's not like she can really do anything about it. But if the guy was doing all of those things before he had sex with this woman, there's a pretty good chance that this guy would not only get all of those assignments done, but he'd have them done so well that not only would it pass plagiarism, but she'd be getting straight A's from that alone. Alright, now personally speaking, I do not think that women lose all of their value after sex. I do like to think that some of them keep it, because you never know, maybe she can whip you up a nice meal after you've laid pipe. But for a lot of guys, after you've had the sex, the value in continuously chasing the same woman kind of goes away if you weren't interested in her beyond the sex. And there's a lot of guys who usually don't know the difference or don't feel the difference between being sexually interested in a woman and being intimately interested in her beyond just the sex. There's a lot of guys that don't know that difference, and a lot of times when a guy is super horny, it can be very easy to mistake sexual interest for interest of the romantic nature, which is why a lot of times guys will tell other guys not to make decisions when they're super horny, because a lot of times they can end up making the wrong ones. And it usually comes back to the fact that they were probably horny at that time. Although then again, I might be wrong about this shit, just to say I could be wrong about everything or something else on this episode, so I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open on Twitter, or is it X? It is at Bagaka the D. On Facebook, it is at The Break Time Podcast, and on IG, it is at The Break Time _podcast. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.